Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome to the bonus show. David, how many vaccines are free in the United States?
I honestly don't know. I mean, when you say free, you mean not free with health insurance. You mean just flat out free. You show up somewhere and you get a vaccine.
Right.
I don't know if any are, to be honest.
Right. I'm pretty sure the answer is 0. Now, in stark contrast to that, India has just added 4 free vaccines to their list of vaccines. This brings the number of free vaccines available in India to 13. That means every citizen is entitled to these 13 vaccines, and they're all free. Now, why this one new one includes the rotavirus. It also includes, there were a couple that I assumed would have been already part of the program, but the 4 new vaccines are rotavirus, rubella, polio, and Japanese encephalitis. So, as I'm sure everybody knows, India has a huge population. So I don't think it's, it's kind of a big deal when everyone in the country is allowed to get these 13 free vaccines. Of course, at the same time, we know that India does not honor the patent system. So these vaccines are probably being produced by India and if they were to charge for them, it would be significantly lower than what we charge for them in this country.
Now, to go back to the thing about free vaccines in the U.S., as far as I know, just about every state has health care for children of poor families if they can't afford it. And with that, they do have the vaccines for free. So while the insurance company may be paying for it, vaccines are effectively free for much of the population, even though I understand that on the back end, there's still a financial transaction going on.
Right. And who knows, perhaps with the government, that's where the back end of this transaction is,
right.
Government and pharmaceuticals. But still, there's just less in the way of this vaccine program. And so, yeah, I guess this Japanese encephalitis is kind of a new thing that's been plaguing India. But I just find it interesting that, first of all, it's telling that this program is necessary. I mean, it shows just how bad things are in a lot of parts of India. But, yeah, I think good for them if they can, get this to all of their people. What is it, like 1.5 billion of them? Something like that. A lot of people. But anyway, free vaccines in India. Also, if you're getting medication, just get it from India if you can, because don't get the expensive stuff here.
Yeah, but there have been cases. I mean, I know what you're saying. There have been cases of getting stuff from India that is not what it is. In fact, there was a guy on the Howard Stern show who started getting the stuff to prevent baldness. Is it Propecia, I think it's called? Started getting that from India, and it had insane side effects, and it was clearly not up to the same standards. So it's not by virtue of being from India, but the idea of buying from other countries when you don't really know what you're buying, it does carry some risks.
Well, right. But Propecia is not something that is necessary. And does Propecia even work? Does the real Propecia even work?
I don't know too much about that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that seems shady. But, a lot of the time when you're getting some type of generic pharmaceutical over the name brand, there's a good chance it's coming from India anyway. And a lot of these are safe and, and coming from reputable companies. But Propecia, that's just weird. Stick with the stuff that, is absolutely necessary, I guess. Restorative justice. David, have you heard of restorative justice?
I have heard about it.
As I clear my throat away from the screen, like the guy who sings Chocolate Rain. Yes. Anyway, Dan sent me this story. Apparently, Dan's aunt is involved in restorative justice, and the story he sent me is was in the New York Times, but is actually about a prison in Norfolk, Massachusetts. And essentially, well, what is restorative justice? It is when these inmates who have committed crimes sit down with victims and families of victims, and they just have this discussion. I guess the victims ask them questions, and the criminals tell their stories, and I guess it works. I mean, what have you heard about this?
Yeah, I was not at all surprised to read that when you do this, you achieve greater understanding. You can mitigate the desire for revenge, which is what drives much of what's supposed to be a system about justice, is really very often driven by a desire for revenge or vengeance. It mitigates that, but it also is way more effective at reducing the chance that the perpetrator will perpetrate again, because there is actual direct understanding of what the impact of their actions are. And very often, when you get into a cycle of crime, it can be, oh, I commit the crime and the consequence is I sit in prison for a while. But actually it's, I commit a crime and there's an entire family behind that crime that now has to deal with what I've done. So I think it's completely obvious that it would have a positive impact. I don't know exactly how it can be worked in with regard to sentencing and rehabilitation guidelines. I don't know that part of it. I'm sure people have different ideas.
Yeah. The focus of the story here is a guy named Mohammed Sahin. And I guess for about 15 years before this program arose, he essentially was ordered to, in a gang-ordered hit, kill the mother of this child. And the child, he remembers the child witnessing the hit, and pretty brutal stuff. And he was talking to a woman whose son was killed, and he said that the experience, basically, this interaction actually made him understand what he put the family through. And it's pretty crazy stuff. I don't know. I mean, I imagine there's a lot of emotions in these meetings, but in September, Massachusetts is going to pilot a curriculum on restorative justice modeled on a program called the Victim Offender Education Group, which was developed for California and San Quentin State Prison. Meeting weekly for 34 weeks, participants will undergo a probing process aimed at acquiring accountability for the harm they caused. This type of thing does seem to work pretty well wherever it is implemented, and it's I think it's a good thing. I mean, it seems like in a lot of cases, it's something extra that that the prison and people from outside the prison agree to do, just to kind of improve the life of the prisoners, and maybe also help victims and the families of victims. And I don't know, maybe one day we will see it as part of normal prison business. But don't look for it in for-profit prisons. I'll say that. Certainly that's an extra cost that they just cannot incur.
Right.
Let's talk about tiny houses. David, did you watch that documentary called Tiny on Netflix?
I did. I was going to do it. I had on my list of possible recommendations for like my Thursday recommendations because it was excellent. Really, really good.
Yeah. So
kind of pretentious and esoteric, I should mention, but very good.
True. There is some pretension there, but I find it fascinating, and I think everyone should watch it. Like I said, it's on Netflix. It's called Tiny. It's about people that build and live in tiny houses.
Very often houses that are kind of built on a little trailer even, so that they can be driven around, so you could kind of live wherever.
Not only that, if it's on wheels and a certain size, you can also avoid certain taxes and fees. And hey, you could just, if you have a friend who owns tons of land, you can just say, hey, can I park this on your land? And there you have a free place to live, essentially. So right, these people build these tiny houses, um, ranging in size from, I've seen ones as small as like 60 to 80 square feet up to around 150 to 175 square feet. These are the size of those homes, generally speaking, and it is pretty fascinating. A lot of these, some of the bigger ones, like 150 to 175 square feet. After watching that and doing some other research, it seems like generally speaking, the cost of these homes is anywhere from, I would say, if you go the cheap route, about 10 grand, and the more expensive ones, 25, 30 grand.
Right.
And yeah, I guess the point is that you just downsize, get rid of a lot of your belongings.
I agree with a lot of the concepts. Like, I've been big, especially when I moved to New York. I really did try to just get rid of stuff that I don't need. If I really think I might need it in the future, put it away for now. But like, if I don't end up needing it for another year, then I can probably get rid of it. I'm way into the simplification and having less stuff. It makes it easier to travel when you need to have less stuff with you. The only thing is, some of these spaces are really small. I don't know that I could live in some of the tiny houses that are depicted in the movie. Especially with someone else. I mean, a lot of these are like couples that are living in these tiny houses, and I would have a really tough time doing that. I know people adjust to most everything, so I could probably adjust to it, but it seems like it would be quite difficult.
It's funny, David, moving to New York City, which is just about more and bigger and faster and more expensive, and then having to downsize and throw out get rid of half your stuff and simplify. It seems, I don't know, just funny moving to a place like New York City and having to do that. But that's what people have to do.
Well, no, it wasn't so much that. It was just, when you live, I had been in my previous place for like 4 years or something like that.
Or you build up stuff.
You accumulate a bunch of stuff. Yeah. So regardless of where I was moving to, it's an opportunity to say, okay, what do I actually need for my life? And what else is stuff I've just gotten accustomed to having around?
Yeah. So some of these tiny houses are actually built brilliantly. What I like about them is that you have to use the space. You can't neglect 1 inch of space in these tiny homes. And there was one I looked up online that I think was far superior to any of the ones I saw, even in the documentary. And it was called, the name of the tiny house was just called Home, but I think the O and the M were capitalized. Anyway, this guy built a brilliant home, and he used the space so well. And something about that lifestyle just seems kind of appealing. Like, not that necessarily I'd want to do it forever, but I'd want to try it. But my question to people is, if you're going to spend, let's say, 30 grand, okay, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less, but this is, assuming you're including all the appliances and all of that, on one of these tiny homes, and then have to go through the process of building it yourself. And you might be a little more comfortable in one of these tiny homes, but you could spend 8 to 10 grand on a used large travel trailer. And it seems that would be far more economic. I don't know. I mean, what is the appeal when you have the tiny home instead? Just more standing room, more space?
What do you mean by a travel trailer?
Like an Airstream or like one of these campers, trailers that like people live in these things.
I think in the movie, for a lot of people, that's just too much space. Like, they don't need that much space. They really want the minimum space. I think for some of them, it's being able to tow it with not huge vehicles was another factor. But also, it has to be below a certain size, like we said, to avoid being designated as a mobile home. So that, I think, is also a factor. I think there's a lot of different factors. Plus, for a lot of these people, it was like building green and building completely sustainable. Most of those aren't that. And also, I don't know that those go for $8,000 to $10,000. I mean, maybe very, very used, right?
Well, I mean, the only ones that are like truly outrageously expensive are the Airstreams. And, even a small Airstream, like the smallest ones will still cost you like 30 grand, 40 grand. But it's because of the way they're built. I mean, these other ones are, made with like plastics and fiberglass and stuff, and they're just a lot cheaper, and you can get a really nice, really big one that has only been used, for a couple years for a surprisingly low amount of money, and they have everything. I've never owned one. But I would just ask people, yeah, maybe it is the green thing, or you built it yourself. That and a tiny house is probably more attractive than one of these fiberglass travel trailers. Actually, they're definitely more attractive because you can still make it look however you want. And I also looked up, just along the same lines, like container houses made from shipping containers, and the in-ground homes and all of these things. I don't know. It's all really interesting. So yes, if anyone has experience with tiny houses or living in trailers or in-ground homes or container homes, send me your stories and I will go over them after I get them on the bonus show. That's all for today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.